Captain Jake Morrison stood at the large window of his ship, watching Earth slowly turn below him. The planet looked beautiful from space, with blue oceans and white clouds swirling over green and brown continents. Cities floated in the sky, held up by advanced technology that had been perfected over many centuries. Everything was peaceful and clean. Jake was 58 years old and had spent his entire career in the Terran Peace Corps. For 40 years, he had traveled between human colonies, helping solve problems and keeping peace. His ship, the UES Harmony, was designed for exploration and diplomacy, not fighting. Most of the crew had never seen real violence except in old history movies. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Johnson as she walked up to him. She was carrying a data pad with the daily reports. "The trade talks with the Centauri colonies went well. They agreed to send us more food supplies, and we promised to share our new water purification technology." Jake nodded and smiled. This was how problems were solved in the modern age. People talked, they shared resources, and everyone benefited. Violence was something from the ancient past, something that civilized beings had moved beyond. Dr. Chris Parker joined them at the observation window. He was the ship's chief scientist, a man who had spent his life studying alien plants and animals. "The conference on Proxima Base was excellent," he said happily. "The Valdorian scientists were very interested in our research about growing food in space. They want to work together on new projects." Jake felt proud of what humanity had accomplished. 2,000 years ago, his ancestors had fought terrible wars that killed millions of people. Cities had been destroyed, countries had been wiped out, and the planet had nearly died from pollution and destruction. But humans had learned from their mistakes. The Great Peace had begun after the last major war ended. People had decided that fighting was stupid and wasteful. Instead of building weapons, they built schools and hospitals. Instead of training soldiers, they trained scientists and teachers. War became something that only happened in history books. "Any news from the outer colonies?" Jake asked. Amy checked her data pad. "Everything is quiet. The mining operations in the asteroid belt are ahead of schedule. The research station on Europa discovered some interesting bacteria in the ocean under the ice. The colony on Mars just celebrated its 500th anniversary." These were the kinds of reports Jake liked to hear. People working together, discovering new things, building better lives for their children. Human space was filled with peaceful activities: farmers growing food, scientists making discoveries, artists creating beautiful works of art. The ship's security officer, Lieutenant Tom Miller, approached the group. He was a young man who had joined the Peace Corps to see the galaxy and help people. The weapon on his belt had never been fired except during training exercises. "Captain, we just received a message from Earth Command. They want us to investigate some strange readings near the edge of the solar system. Probably just a broken sensor or maybe a lost cargo ship." Jake nodded. This was the kind of mission the Harmony was built for. They would go investigate, probably find some simple technical problem and help fix it. Maybe they would rescue some stranded travelers or recover valuable cargo. What none of them knew was that far away, in a star system called Krell Prime, something very different was happening. The hegemony of Krell was holding a war council, and they were talking about Earth. High Commander Zethkar stood before a room full of military leaders. He was a tall, powerful alien with gray skin and forearms that ended in sharp claws. The Krell had been conquering other species for over 1,000 years, and they were very good at it. "The humans have grown soft," Zethkar told his officers. "Our spies report that they have not fought a real war in 2,000 years. Their ships carry scientists instead of soldiers. Their weapons are old and weak." The other Krell officers made sounds of agreement. They had studied human space for months, watching the peaceful activities of the colonies. They saw cargo ships that had no armor, research stations that had no defenses, and exploration vessels that seemed more like flying gardens than warships. "What about their military?" asked one of the younger officers. Zethkar laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "They call it a Peace Corps. They spend their time growing flowers and talking to aliens about trade agreements. Their soldiers are really just police officers who help lost tourists." The Krell had conquered dozens of species. They knew what real warriors looked like, and humans did not fit the pattern. Real warriors were always ready to fight. They kept their weapons sharp and their ships armed. They respected strength and despised weakness. From what the Krell could see, humans had forgotten how to be strong. They had chosen peace over power, cooperation over conquest. This made them perfect targets for invasion. "How many ships do they have that could fight?" another officer asked. "Perhaps 30 vessels that could be called warships," Zethkar replied. "Old designs, poorly armed, crewed by people who have never seen real combat. We could destroy their entire fleet with half our forces." The decision was easy. The Krell would attack human space, conquer their colonies, and enslave their people. It would be a simple campaign against a weak enemy. The humans would probably surrender without much of a fight. Back on the Harmony, Jake was having dinner with his senior officers. They talked about their families, their hobbies, and their plans for the future. Dr. Parker showed pictures of rare flowers he had found on distant worlds. Lieutenant Johnson discussed her plans to open a school for alien children when she retired. "You know," Jake said as he looked around the table, "I sometimes wonder what it would have been like to live during the old wars. Can you imagine having to fight other people instead of working with them?" Tom Miller shook his head. "I'm glad those days are over. The idea of actually shooting at someone, of trying to hurt another person, it seems impossible." They all agreed. Violence was something from humanity's dark past. Modern humans were civilized, educated, and peaceful. They solved problems with words, not weapons. They built things instead of destroying them. None of them could imagine that in just a few days their peaceful world would be shattered. The Krell fleet was already moving toward human space, expecting to find easy prey. They had no idea that they were about to wake up something that had been sleeping for 2,000 years. Humanity had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply chosen not to. But when that choice was taken away from them, when their families and their way of life were threatened, they would remember everything their ancestors had learned about war. The sleeping dragon was about to wake up, and when it did, the galaxy would burn. The morning started like any other on Luna Base. Admiral Lisa Davis was watering her tomato plants in the greenhouse when the emergency alarm screamed through the speakers. She dropped her watering can and ran toward the command center. Her heart was beating fast, but she told herself it was probably just another drill. Commander Ben Hughes was already at his station when she arrived. His face was white as paper. "Admiral, you need to see this," he said, pointing at the main screen. 12 massive ships hung in space near Pluto. They were bigger than anything humans had ever built. Dark metal hulls covered with weapons that looked like they could crack planets in half. The ships moved in perfect formation, like a pack of hunting wolves. "Have we tried talking to them?" Lisa asked, even though she already knew the answer from Ben's expression. "We sent every greeting protocol we have. English, Chinese, Spanish, Mandarin, even the old trade languages from the outer colonies. Nothing. They just destroyed our sensor station at Pluto without any warning." Lisa felt cold. The sensor station was unmanned, but it was still an act of war. She had read about war in history books, but seeing it happen was different. Much different. The alien ships began moving toward the inner solar system. They traveled fast, much faster than human ships. At this speed, they would reach Earth in less than 2 days. "Get me a direct line to President Blake on Earth," Lisa ordered, "and send word to every human ship and station in the system. Tell them to prepare for possible evacuation." As she waited for the connection, Lisa watched the alien fleet on her screen. Each ship was at least 3 times bigger than the largest human vessel. Weapons covered their hulls like spines on an angry animal. These beings had come for war, not peace. President Susan Blake appeared on the communication screen. She was in her office in Geneva, and Lisa could see other government officials rushing around behind her. "Lisa, please tell me this is some kind of mistake," the president said. "I wish I could. They destroyed our Pluto station and they're heading straight for Earth. We've tried every form of communication we know. They're not interested in talking." The president closed her eyes for a moment. How long do we have? Less than 48 hours at their current speed. I'm calling an emergency session of the Global Assembly. We need to decide how to respond. Before Lisa could answer, new signals appeared on her screen. The alien ships were sending a message. The translation computers worked for several minutes before words appeared on the screen. Weak species of Earth. Your technology is primitive. Your warriors are soft. Surrender your worlds or watch them burn. You have one rotation of your planet to comply. Resistance will bring only death. The message was simple and brutal. Lisa felt anger rising in her chest. These aliens thought humans were weak just because they had lived in peace for 2,000 years. They're giving us 24 hours, she told the president. What do they want exactly? Everything. Complete surrender of all human worlds and colonies. President Blake was quiet for a long moment. I'll need to discuss this with the assembly, but Lisa, start preparing our defenses, whatever we have. Lisa almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. Human defenses were designed for accidents and natural disasters, not war. Their ships carried tools for exploration and rescue, not weapons for fighting. Most security officers had never fired their weapons except in training. After the call ended, Lisa looked around her command center. These people were scientists, engineers, and explorers. Ben Hughes had been studying asteroid mining techniques just yesterday. Lieutenant Carol Stevens was working on new plant growth systems for Mars colonies. None of them were soldiers, but they would have to become soldiers now. The next few hours brought terrible news. The alien fleet, which called themselves the Krell, proved they were serious about their threats. They attacked the research station at Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Lisa watched the attack happen in real time. The research station sent out a desperate message asking for help. 300 scientists worked there, studying the ocean beneath Europa's ice. They had no weapons, no shields, nothing but their research equipment. The Krell ships fired once. A beam of bright energy hit the station and it simply disappeared. 300 people died in 2 seconds. Men and women who had spent their lives trying to understand the universe, trying to make life better for everyone. Lisa felt something change inside her chest. The anger was still there. But now it was joined by something else. Something cold and hard that she had never felt before. News of the Europa attack spread across human space in minutes. Every person in every colony and station now knew that the Krell were serious. This was not a misunderstanding or a failed first contact. This was war. Captain Jake Morrison received new orders while his ship, the Harmony, was docked at Ceres Station. His peaceful exploration vessel was being fitted with defensive systems that had been stored in warehouses for centuries. The weapons looked strange next to his science equipment and comfortable crew quarters. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Johnson, "the crew is scared. Most of us have never seen real violence before." Jake nodded. He was scared too. But he was also angry. The Krell had made a mistake. They thought that because humans chose peace, humans were weak. They thought that because human ships carried gardens instead of guns, humans could not fight. They were about to learn how wrong they were. On Earth, President Blake stood before the Global Assembly. Representatives from every nation and colony filled the Great Hall. Many of them were crying. Some were angry. All of them were afraid. "The Krell have given us a choice," she said. "Surrender or fight. But I believe they have not given us a real choice at all. If we surrender, we become slaves. If we fight, we might die free." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would fight. In secret locations across Earth and the colonies, sealed doors began to open. Doors that had been locked for 2,000 years. Behind those doors were the memories of war, the knowledge of violence, the tools of destruction that humanity had put away when they chose peace. The sleeping dragon was waking up. Deep under the mountains of Switzerland, old doors were opening for the first time in 2,000 years. Director Paul Anderson walked down a long hallway that his grandfather had told him about in whispers. The air smelled dusty and cold. Emergency. Lights flickered on as he moved deeper into the mountain. Paul had been a history teacher before this crisis began. He taught children about the old wars and why humanity had chosen peace. Now he was opening the most dangerous library in human space. The war archives contained everything humanity had learned about fighting and killing, everything they had decided to forget. His hands shook as he entered the access codes. The massive steel door moved slowly, grinding open like the mouth of a sleeping monster. Inside, rows and rows of data storage units stretched into the darkness. Each one contained the accumulated knowledge of human warfare spanning thousands of years. "My God," whispered Dr. Amy Clark, who had come with him. She had been a botanist 2 days ago, growing flowers for the Mars colonies. Now she was studying weapons designs that could destroy entire fleets. The first files they opened showed battle plans from ancient Earth wars, strategies that had won and lost empires, tactics that had changed the course of history. As they dug deeper, they found more recent designs, weapons that had been built but never used, ships that had been planned but never needed. Paul picked up a data pad and began reading. His face grew pale as he understood what he was looking at. "This is a blueprint for a plasma cannon that can punch through 3 feet of solid steel. And, look at this, a missile system that can track a target across an entire star system." Meanwhile, on Mars colony, they were waking up the one person who remembered what real war looked like. General Sam Cooper was 87 years old and had been enjoying his retirement in a small dome house near the Polar Research Station. He spent his days reading books and playing chess with his neighbor. When the military transport arrived, Sam knew why they had come. He had been waiting for this day, hoping it would never arrive. "General Cooper," said Colonel Linda Shaw as she stepped out of the transport. "We need you." Sam looked at her young face and sighed. "How bad is it?" "The Krell have 12 dreadnoughts and they've already destroyed Europa Station. We have maybe 30 ships that could fight, and most of our people have never seen combat." Sam nodded slowly. He had fought in the border wars, the last real conflict before the Great Peace. Back then, humans still remembered how to be soldiers. "Show me what we're working with." They flew to the main military base on Mars, which had been converted into a museum 50 years ago. Now, technicians were frantically trying to bring old systems back online. Weapons that had been displayed behind glass were being installed on ships that had never been designed for war. Captain Kate Wilson was supervising the retrofit of a cargo hauler called the Iron Duke. She had been an engineer, designing water recycling systems for space stations. Now she was mounting railguns on a ship that used to carry grain to the outer colonies. "The power systems can handle the weapons load," she told Sam as he inspected her work. "But the targeting computers are ancient. We're basically guessing where to shoot." Sam smiled grimly. "Sometimes guessing is enough. The important thing is that you shoot first and shoot often." Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. On Titan, factory workers were converting mining equipment into weapons. On Ganymede, teachers were learning to use military equipment that had been gathering dust in storage facilities. But the Krell were not waiting. Commander Zethkar led his battle group toward the asteroid belt, where human mining operations produced most of the raw materials for the colonies. He expected to find frightened workers and lightly armed cargo ships. The first attack came at Ceres Station, the largest mining facility in the belt. Chief Engineer Dan Kelly was a quiet man who had spent 20 years maintaining the station's fusion reactors. He had a wife and 2 children back on Earth, and he sent them messages every day. When the Krell ships appeared, Dan was in the reactor control room. The station's minimal defenses fired a few shots that bounced harmlessly off the alien shields. Then the Krell began their bombardment. "This is Ceres Station," Dan broadcast on all frequencies. "We are under attack. The Krell are destroying everything. If anyone receives this message, tell my family I love them." But Dan did not just wait to die. As the Krell ships moved closer to finish off the station, he began working on the fusion reactor controls. His hands moved quickly across panels he knew better than his own face. The Krell had studied human technology and decided it was primitive. They had not bothered to learn about human fusion reactors and how they could be modified. They did not know that a clever engineer could turn a power source into a bomb. Dan's final message was simple: for humanity. The explosion lit up space. For 1,000,000 kilometers, Ceres Station disappeared in a ball of plasma that reached temperatures found only in the hearts of stars. The blast caught the nearest Krell cruiser and tore it apart like paper. Commander Zethkar watched from his flagship as one of his ships died. This was not supposed to happen. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to surrender without fighting. "Status report," he demanded. "The Harmony's revenge is gone, Commander. The humans destroyed their own station to take it with them." Zethkar felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest. Doubt. These humans were not acting like the defeated species he was used to fighting. They were acting like warriors. Back on Earth, news of Dan Kelly's sacrifice spread like wildfire. People who had never heard of Ceres Station now knew the name of the engineer who died fighting. His picture appeared on news broadcasts across human space. His wife and children became symbols of what humanity was fighting for. President Blake held another emergency session, but this time the mood was different. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with anger and determination. "Dan, Kelly showed us something important," she told the assembled representatives. "He showed us that we are not helpless. The Krell think our peace made us weak. They are about to learn how wrong they are." In the war archives, Paul Anderson and his team were working around the clock. They had found something that made them all stop and stare. It was a file labeled Project Sleeping Dragon, and it contained plans for weapons that had been designed but never built during the last war. "These designs," Paul said quietly, "they're not just weapons. They're works of art. Terrible, beautiful works of art." Dr. Amy Clark looked at the specifications for something called a gravity lance. It could grab an enemy ship and tear it apart using its own momentum. The people who designed these, they understood physics in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. General Cooper arrived at the archives that evening. He looked at the files they had uncovered and nodded slowly. "I remember some of these projects. We shelved them because we thought they were too dangerous, too destructive." "Are they practical?" Paul asked. "Oh yes," Sam replied. "They're very practical. The question is whether we're ready to become the kind of people who would build such things." Paul thought about Dan Kelly and the 300 scientists who died at Europa. He thought about the Krell ships hanging in space like hungry wolves. "I think we already became those people. We just forgot for a while." As night fell on Earth, factories across the planet began working on new projects. The sleeping dragon was not just waking up, it was remembering how to breathe fire. 3 weeks after the first Krell attack, humanity was no longer the same species. Admiral Mike Taylor stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching his fleet prepare for battle. The ship had been an exploration vessel just a month ago, designed to study distant stars and make peaceful contact with alien life. Now it bristled with weapons that had been built from ancient blueprints. "Admiral, we have the Krell battle group on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Joe Miller. He had been a communications specialist, helping colonies stay in touch with Earth. Now he was tracking enemy ships and calculating firing solutions. Dr. Amy Clark sat at the tactical station, her fingers dancing over controls she had learned to use in just 2 weeks. She had studied plant biology her whole life, but war had a way of teaching people new skills quickly. 12 ships, including their flagship. They're heading straight for Jupiter. Mike nodded. The Battle of Jupiter would decide whether humanity lived or died as a free species. His fleet was a mixture of converted cargo ships, refitted exploration vessels, and a few actual warships that had been built from the old designs. On paper, they should have been destroyed in minutes. But paper did not account for human creativity. "All ships, this is Admiral Taylor," he broadcast to his fleet. "Remember what we learned from the archives. The Krell fight like they always have. They expect us to line up and trade shots like gentlemen. We're not going to do that." Captain Nick Barnes commanded a squadron of converted mining ships. These vessels had been designed to crack asteroids and extract valuable minerals. Now they carried something much more dangerous. "Mining squadron ready, Admiral. We've got the special packages loaded and armed." The special packages were Nick's idea. Instead of traditional warheads, his ships carried chunks of dense metal, accelerated to incredible speeds. The Krell shields could stop energy weapons, but they had trouble with simple kinetic projectiles, moving at significant fractions of light speed. As the fleets approached each other, the Krell opened fire first. Beams of superheated plasma reached across space designed to cook human ships from the inside out. Several human vessels took hits, their hulls glowing red-hot, but they kept coming. "Return fire," Mike ordered. "Execute pattern chaos." Pattern chaos was something the war archives had called asymmetric warfare. Instead of fighting the way the enemy expected, humans would fight in ways that made no sense to conventional military thinking. Small ships attacked large ones, damaged vessels, accelerated toward the enemy instead of retreating. Every human ship seemed to be following a different plan. The Krell had fought dozens of species, but they had never faced anything like this. Their formations began to break apart as human ships darted between them like angry wasps. Captain Kate Wilson flew her converted cargo hauler directly under a Krell dreadnought, firing railguns at point-blank range into its belly. "This is Wilson," she called out over the radio. "I've got a clear shot at their reactor housing, going for the kill shot." Her ship disappeared in a ball of flame as the Krell vessel exploded, but she had proven something important. The aliens could be hurt. They could be killed. On the surface of Ganymede, Colonel Linda Shaw was fighting a different kind of battle. The Krell had landed ground troops, expecting to find terrified civilians. Instead, they found teachers, artists, and farmers who had learned to fight like soldiers. Linda had been a Peace Corps engineer before the war. She had built schools and hospitals on a dozen worlds. Now she was teaching kindergarten teachers how to use sniper rifles and showing artists how to build improvised explosives. "Remember," she told her volunteers as they prepared for another attack, "the Krell are bigger and stronger than us, but they're not smarter. They think in straight lines. We think in circles." Her volunteers had turned the colony into a maze of traps and ambushes. When the Krell soldiers advanced, they found that every building could be a fortress and every civilian could be a warrior. The aliens had armor and energy weapons, but the humans had something more valuable. They were fighting for their homes. Back in space, the battle was reaching its climax. Admiral Taylor's flagship had taken heavy damage, but the human fleet was still fighting. More importantly, they were winning. The Krell had lost 4 ships, while humanity had lost only 2. "Admiral," called Dr. Amy Clark from her station, "I'm reading massive energy buildup from their flagship. I think they're preparing to ram us." Mike smiled grimly. The Krell commander was getting desperate. That was good. Desperate enemies made mistakes. "All ships concentrate fire on the flagship's engines. If he wants to ram us, let's make sure he can't steer." The combined fire of the human fleet hammered the Krell flagship. Its shields flickered and failed. Its engines began to sputter and die. The massive ship began to drift, powerless and helpless. But the battle was not over. The remaining Krell ships regrouped and began a final assault. Their commander had decided that if he could not win, he would take as many humans with him as possible. That was when Captain Nick Barnes made his decision. His mining ship was damaged and losing power. His crew was injured and his weapons were nearly empty. But he still had one weapon left: his ship itself. "All ships, this is Barnes. I'm going to ram their command vessel. Tell my wife I love her." "Nick, wait," Admiral Taylor called out, but it was too late. The mining ship accelerated toward the Krell flagship. Its engines pushed far beyond their design limits. The Krell tried to shoot it down, but the small vessel was moving too fast and too erratically. It struck the alien ship dead center, and both vessels disappeared in a flash of light that could be seen from Jupiter's moons. The remaining Krell ships hesitated. They had expected an easy victory over a weak species. Instead, they had found warriors who fought with a fury that terrified them. These humans did not just fight to win. They fought to make sure their enemies lost, even if it cost them everything. Dr. Rob Edwards watched the battle from his laboratory on Earth. He had been working around the clock since the war began, studying captured Krell technology and looking for weaknesses. Finally, he had found something important. "I've got it," he announced to his team. The Krell shields have a fatal flaw. They're designed to stop energy weapons, but they have trouble with kinetic projectiles fired at specific angles. He sent his findings to Admiral Taylor just as the human fleet was preparing for another assault. The information spread through the fleet in minutes. Suddenly, every human ship knew exactly how to hurt the Krell. The tide of battle turned completely. Human ships began targeting the weak points in Krell shields with surgical precision. The aliens found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as primitive. When the last Krell ship exploded, a cheer went up across human space. The Battle of Jupiter was over and humanity had won. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Good people had died. Heroes like Nick Barnes and Dan Kelly had sacrificed everything to protect their species. Admiral Taylor looked at the debris field that had been two fleets. Pieces of metal and plastic drifted in the vacuum, all that remained of ships and the people who had crewed them. The war was far from over, but humanity had proven something important. They were not the weak species the Krell had expected to find. They were something much more dangerous. They were humans who had remembered how to fight, and they were just getting started. The final battle came to Earth's doorstep 3 months after the war began. High Commander Zethkar brought the full power of the Krell hegemony with him. 40 massive warships emerged from hyperspace, each one bigger than a human city. They had come to finish what they started and teach the galaxy what happened to species that dared to fight back. Admiral Lisa Davis stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the enemy fleet form up near the moon. Her ship had been built in just 6 weeks using every scrap of knowledge from the war archives. It was ugly compared to the sleek exploration vessels of the past, but it was designed for one purpose only: to kill. "All stations report ready," said Commander Ben Hughes. He had learned to be a warrior in the hardest school possible, through actual combat. His peaceful days of managing supply schedules seemed like a dream from another life. Lisa looked around her bridge. Dr. Amy Clark was at tactical, her botanist training somehow making her better at predicting enemy movements. Lieutenant Joe Miller handled communications, his voice steady as he coordinated with dozens of ships. These people had been gardeners and teachers and scientists. Now they were the last line of defense for their entire species. "Open a channel to the Krell flagship," Lisa ordered. High Commander Zethkar appeared on the main screen. He was 7 feet tall with gray skin and 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. His eyes were cold and filled with rage. "Human, Admiral," he said in a voice like grinding stones, "you have caused us great trouble. Your species will pay for every Krell warrior you have killed. Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick." Lisa smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Commander Zethkar, you made a mistake when you attacked us. You thought our peace made us weak. You were wrong. Our peace made us strong. And when you forced us to remember war, we remembered everything." She cut the connection and turned to her crew. "All ships, this is Admiral Davis. Today we end this war. Show them what humans can do when they have no choice but to fight." The battle began like a storm in space. 40 Krell dreadnoughts against 60 human ships that had been built from salvage and desperation. On paper, it should have been a massacre. The Krell had better weapons, stronger shields, and more experience. But the Krell had never fought humans before. Captain Pete Johnson led the first attack wave in his ship, the Dancing Bear. It had been a passenger liner that carried families between colonies. Now it was armed with railguns that could punch holes through asteroids. "Remember Jupiter," Pete broadcast as his ship dove straight into the enemy formation. "Remember Dan Kelly. Remember Europa Station." His ship was destroyed within seconds, but not before his railguns crippled a Krell cruiser. More human ships followed, each one pressing attacks that made no tactical sense but somehow worked. The key to human victory was not superior technology or better training. It was creativity. While the Krell fought like they always had, with rigid formations and predictable tactics, humans fought like artists, creating a masterpiece of destruction. Captain Kate Wilson commanded a squadron of converted mining ships. Instead of attacking the Krell vessels directly, she targeted the asteroids near Earth. Massive rocks accelerated to incredible speeds, became weapons that could crack dreadnought hulls. "This is Wilson," she called out as her improvised missiles found their targets. Physics lesson for the Krell. Big rock plus high speed equals dead aliens. On Earth's surface, President Susan Blake watched the battle from the command bunker deep beneath Geneva. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, decided by people who had learned to be warriors in a matter of months. "Ma'am," said her aide, "we're getting reports from the outer colonies. The Krell have sent raiding parties to attack civilian targets." Susan's face hardened. The aliens were trying to force humanity to surrender by threatening innocent people. It was exactly what she had expected from a species that respected only strength. "Send word to all colonies," she ordered. "Fight with everything you have. Do not surrender. Do not give up. Show them that every human is a warrior when pushed too far." In space, the battle was reaching its climax. The Krell flagship, a massive vessel called the Iron Fist, was trying to break through human lines to bombard Earth directly. High Commander Zethkar had decided that if he could not defeat the human fleet, he would destroy their home world. Admiral Lisa Davis saw what the enemy commander was trying to do. Her ship was damaged and her fleet was scattered, but she had one more card to play. The UES Harmony, Captain Jake Morrison's old exploration vessel, had been fitted with an experimental weapon from the deepest files of the war archives. "Jake," she called over the radio, "are you ready?" Captain Morrison's voice came back calm and steady. "Been ready since Europa, Admiral. Just give me a clear shot." The Harmony accelerated toward the Krell flagship, dodging plasma beams and missile strikes. The ship had been designed to explore the galaxy in peace, but now it carried humanity's most dangerous weapon. A gravity lance that could tear apart matter at the atomic level. "This is for every human who died," Jake said quietly as his ship closed with the enemy. "This is for the future we choose to protect." The gravity lance fired just once. The beam struck the Iron Fist and the massive Krell vessel simply came apart. Its atoms scattered across space. High Commander Zethkar had just enough time to send one final message to his home world before he died. "Do not underestimate the humans. We thought their peace made them weak. We were wrong. Their peace made them strong, and when forced to war, they remember everything." The remaining Krell ships tried to flee, but they had come too far into human space. One by one, they were hunted down and destroyed by ships crewed by former farmers and teachers and artists who had learned that sometimes peace can only be protected through war. When the last enemy vessel exploded, a silence fell over human space. The war was over. Earth was safe. But the cost had been terrible. Thousands of good people had died. Heroes whose names would be remembered as long as humanity existed. President Blake addressed not just humanity, but the watching galaxy. Every species with radio telescopes had seen the battle. They had watched a peaceful civilization transform into something that could fight and win against one of the most feared military powers in the galaxy. "We chose peace not from weakness, but from strength," she said. Her words broadcast across 100 star systems. "We abandoned war not because we could not fight, but because we chose not to. That choice made us better. But when threatened, we remember who we were, and we become who we need to be." The message spread from world to world, from species to species. Humanity had sent a clear signal to the galaxy. They were not victims. They were not easy prey. They were humans, and when pushed too far, they would push back with everything they had. In the years that followed, other species would test humanity's resolve. Pirates would raid human colonies. Slavers would try to capture human ships. Warlords would threaten human worlds. Each time, they would learn the same lesson the Krell had learned. Peace is not the absence of the capacity for war. Peace is the choice not to use that capacity. And when that choice is threatened, the response is all the more terrible for being so long delayed. The sleeping dragon had awakened, and the galaxy would never forget the fire it breathed.